Thanks for tuning in to Written on the Edge, Season 8, Episode 20. In this week's episode, we will be discussing Rob Osler's books, The Devil's Chew Toy, which is an amazing title, and both of my dogs looked at me funny when I said chew toy. Well, then...
You're in trouble now.
We'll then jump to... I'm sorry, what?
I said you're in trouble now.
I know. They're both in here with me, too. We'll then jump to our review. We're going to break this episode up into chapters so you can hop to your favorite part, so stick with us. But now, on to our guest. Traditional mysteries featuring LGBTQ plus main characters. His novel, The Devil's Chew Toy, was a 2023 Left Coast Crime Finalist for Best Debut Mystery and an Agatha Awards Finalist for Best First Novel, and named a 2022 year's Best by Crime Reads. Why are you still laughing at me?
Because you said his devil.
Novel. Quit making fun of me. Anyway.
It's rare. That's why I did it.
And named a 2022 year's Best Crime Reads by BOLO Books, PopSugar, and Book Riot. The sequel to Devil's Chew Toy, titled Cirque du Slay, comes out March 9, 2024. His first publication, Analogue, an Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine, won the 2022 Mystery Writers of America Robert L. Fish Award for Best Short Story by a debut author as part of the Edgar Awards. Forthcoming works include Misdirection in Ellery Queen's September-October edition, and Red Shoes in The Brutal and Strange, an anthology based on Elvis Costello songs from Down and Out Books. Also on the horizon is The Case of the Missing Maid, book one in a new historical series featuring a queer female detective in Chicago in the Progressive Era from Kensington Books. Rob, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Before I ask
when do you sleep?
I was about to say...
I have a lot going on.
You really do.
Yeah.
No, it's all good. It's what we hope for. It's what we work for. So
true.
Right.
Yeah.
So
there you go.
Where did the passion come from? What was the first spark?
Oh, goodness. I think it's just a love of telling stories, honestly. And it really just boils down to that. And then, hopefully you create interesting characters. I tend to really push it in terms of over the top characters. And just try to make entertaining stories. And, I love doing it. So it's really just, it's such a privilege to get to publish them, and have people read them and get to talk to you and other people about them. So it's all good.
Awesome. All right. So give us the synopsis of Devil's Chew Toy so we can dive into it.
Okay. I was thinking about this morning and I was like, I think I'm going to do the poem. So to unpack that briefly is, they've got this crazy thing at conferences called author speed dating. Are you familiar with these things?
No.
You literally, so you're paired up with another author. You have 2 minutes to pitch your work to a table full of readers. And then they literally like ring a bell or have a little chime. And the two authors get up and move tables. And you do this, usually it's about 25 tables.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
But it's a super efficient, very accelerated way for authors, to engage with potential readers and pitch their books. So I try to change it up. And this year I did a poem. So I can do this in 90 seconds. But I figured, well, since I already wrote the poem.
There you go. Go for it.
Let's hear it.
So this is an intro to the book, Devil's Chew Toy.
Yay! Lovely.
All right. Ready for fun on a Friday night, our hero hits the dance floor, meets a great guy, but wakes up alone with Seattle's finest at the door. Seems the great guy has gone missing, disappeared sometime in the night. Our hero hardly knew him, yet something's clearly not right. Now, our hero is not your hero type, teaches school, writes a blog, but he has no choice but to get involved. Great guy left behind his dog. This marks the first decision our hero soon regrets. He takes home the dog despite the fact his landlord doesn't allow pets. Converse sneakers double knotted, he sets out to find the guy, but working alone won't be his fate. He's about to diversify. Joining the search are two lesbians, larger than life and unafraid. One's black and sports a mohawk, the other Willie Nelson braids. Stumbling off into danger, the trio's determined to find the truth, and with every step they will lower the bar to being an amateur sleuth. From a marvel of a pet store to a creepy trailer outside town to a sinister airport warehouse where bad business is going down. A speedboat race to an island estate could mark our hero's ends. Just kidding. Criminals don't stand a chance against these three friends. It's all in Devil's Chew Toy, a quozy mystery with heart. If you think it sounds fun so far, good news. That's just the start.
Bravo.
I would
There you
offer to buy you coffee for that. That's
A book
fantastic.
Yeah.
in 90 seconds with rhymes.
That was very
Right,
well done.
Exactly. And no
How do you-
spoilers.
And no spoilers.
Mm-hmm.
Just a few highlights.
That's fantastic. So how did you not like sweep the speed dating competition?
I think that was pretty well received, but it's just 2 minutes and you move on to the next table.
Well,
It's not a competition.
That's fair.
Yeah.
So in there you dropped the word that I was going to ask about next because I had seen this in your material. Quozy. I love it.
Quozy, yeah. My background before doing this is in brand strategy, corporate brand strategy.
Okay.
And one key practice area within that kind of nebulous title is positioning of products, companies, that sort of thing. And one strategy is, is basically to create a new category. So certainly other authors before me have a long string of great cozy mysteries. I'm sure most people know what cozies are. For those few who don't, right? It's like free of violence, free of sex, free of profanity. They're pretty clean reads.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, like if there's a vicar in a rose bush, with a cat somewhere in the horizon, you're probably dealing with a cozy. Miss Marple, Jessica Fletcher, that sort of thing. So for a cozy featuring main, which is very important to me, main characters that are gay, lesbian, trans, etc. I just basically did a mash of like bromance or staycation with cozy and queer, really just to flag, hey, this is a different kind of cozy.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're looking for that kind of read, that subgenre of crime fiction, hey, here's a book that actually features gay and lesbian characters. And I wanted to do that with a new label to give it some distinction. And I'm happy and somewhat surprised to say I've started to see other authors who have cozies with queer characters label them as quozies. Kensington is now doing that, and Crooked Lane is now doing that as well for those
Nice.
particular books. So again, it's not to say that I'm the first to ever write a cozy book featuring gay or lesbian characters. I was just the first to coin that label to try to give it a little bit of elevation.
So can we call you the godfather of the quozy?
Please do.
Awesome.
That's great. It's
love
intriguing,
that.
at least. People are like, what?
Right. Do you own the hashtag on Twitter?
Can you own it? I will put that in there. I mean, so if you do search for that hashtag, you'll probably see a whole lot of me and Devil's Chew Toy.
Nice.
That's for sure.
Nice.
Yeah.
Baz, you were going to ask something?
Yeah, I just on a whim, I just decided I might prompt you with this. So I've decided to write my first mystery. Any advice?
I guess two things just honestly just immediately spring to mind. The first is, and again, this is from decades of having a career in business.
Mm-hmm.
I would encourage anybody who wants to do this to reset their time clock, that things happen in increments of months and years, not days and weeks. So if you're just the drafts, the revisions, if you're going a traditional route, querying agents,
Right.
then the agents turn around and submit to publishers, and all of that. I mean, there are exceptions to the rule. People are like, oh, I got a deal in like 24 hours. I mean, those are less than 1%, I think, of the deals that get made. So number one would be just I say get comfortable, but I never got comfortable. It's very tough to just go, okay, I've been out on submission or I've queried. and it's been 3 months. And
Right.
to be able to really get comfortable with, like, that's not unusual. And the second thing is, during all of that waiting, know that the only thing you control is what you put
Write
on the
another.
page.
Right.
Right. And that's the best advice I ever got, is like, while you're sitting there waiting for that thing, write something else, because you can control that.
Yeah, because I'm decided I'm because I'm part native, and I decided to write uh, a mystery, but with a native protagonist, two spirit, and I'm not going to identify the physical gender at all, to allow
Mm.
anyone who reads it to see themselves in it. And I've even
Mm-hmm.
chosen a name for them that is kind of nebulous, but they
Mm-hmm.
also have a connection to the spirit world. So they get flashes of things. So it's got a little bit of a supernatural edge to it. So I was
Mm-hmm.
thinking more, rather than just the business aspect, what kind of advice would you give as far as craft of writing mystery?
I think,
If you don't
I mean,
mind.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really good webinars and tutorials. Immediately, I think of Sisters in Crime. Don't let the sisters part, like, think, it's like it's only for, women or cisgendered women. Um, they've got a lot of programs. In fact, I'm doing one next Saturday with Tucson Sisters in Crime on characters. So I would avail yourself to all of the different craft workshops, and also read books that are well reviewed, and
Right.
really study how they do things, and, like, pause on a paragraph that somehow, like, captivated you, and it's like, what are they doing there? How did they construct that sentence? All the little things, like, are you describing characters like she was tall and she had red hair? It's like, that's really interesting. Or it's like, what I just wrote, this may come across as too self-congratulatory as an example, but this is just of mine, because I was just having a back and forth with my editor about this. And then in Cirque du Slay, it's like, no, if her beauty was a book, she would be shelved between Taylor Swift and Jennifer Lawrence.
Ah,
So I mean, that's a way to, like, to describe her
right, right,
without,
right.
so just all of those little things of craft, just, pay attention, and just read books of authors who you think, oh,
Yeah.
wow,
I
they
mean, because
know.
I have novels published, but I'm trying to think more along the lines of working a mystery. I mean, for you, do you know how it ends and work backwards, or do you write by the seat of your pants and just let it organically evolve? I mean, what's your method of doing it?
Oh my gosh, such this is a particularly good question for me, because I'm like a poster child of, like, what can go horribly wrong. I used to say, like, I used to say, "Oh, I'm a pantser," and I just, like, "Oh, this is hilarious," or, "This is super intriguing," and I would do what I described as, like, write myself right into a corner, where I would
Mm,
create something, some situation where it's like, that's a brilliant crime. I have absolutely no idea how to solve that. And when I bring in characters, that were supposed to be kind of like walk-ons, and then I'd be interested in them, and I'd create them larger than life, and they take up too much, space on the page. And again, I would write myself into a corner, and then I'd have to go back, and it's like, this makes no sense. This character and what they're doing isn't driving the story forward. And then it's like, wow, that's a whole chapter I have to cut. So I found that, while that was personally fun way to go about it, in terms of crafting a novel, especially, as you point out, like a mystery, where you're traditional mystery, where you're supposed to plant clues, have a
mhm.
number of suspects, play fair with the reader, right? So as you're, like, doling those out,
Don't make last page to the book. A new character comes in, and oh, yeah.
right, all of those things that, the reader goes, that's not fair, because if it works, you get to the end, you're like, right, should have seen that coming. I can go back to page
Mm.
12, there it is. I can go back to page 114, there it is. And for me, man, I learned the hard way. I have to plot out those key elements. And there's a lot of wiggle room around, kind of the spine of the book, if you will. I can go off on tangents as long as I don't go too crazy and have some fun myself.
Hmm.
But I have to know the inciting incident. I have to know who did it. I have to know who else is suspected, why they would be suspected. And then I can start to build the story around kind of that backbone.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. That's exactly what I was looking for.
So a couple of times in there you referenced larger than life characters. You're going to be doing a character workshop. Let's talk about the diversity in the mystery genre. Did you
Mm.
see it lacking and you wanted to provide it, or had you started to see inklings of it and you're like, no, this is how I'm going to do it?
Yeah, it's really the former. It was surprising to me because I go all the way back to Amistad Maupin's Tales of the City,
Hmm.
right, which
Hmm.
started as a column in San Francisco Chronicle, and then it became, a novel, and then it became a long-running series, super successful, super intriguing. But what I loved about that series is you have Michael Tolliver, the gay guy in the gayborhood.
Hmm.
You've got Marianne Singleton, fresh-faced, white conservative young woman from the Midwest. You've got Anna Madrigal. This is a spoiler, so if you haven't read these by now, it's like,
Well, yeah, yeah. If you haven't looked under the rock now, sorry.
right? Who turns out to be, trans,
Hmm.
and she's the landlord at Barbary Lane in this little community.
The
And the
mother of
point of
us
this is,
all.
they're unlikely friendships, but they're really strong friendships and the found family nature.
Hmm.
And then there's
Hmm.
like a little bit of a mystery. Well, I flipped it a little bit where the mystery is bigger than in those stories.
Okay.
But still the elements of fun, friendship, there's an urban adventure. And there are not many of those books which feature, and this is really key to me, that feature gay and lesbian main characters.
Hmm.
They're not sidekicks, they're not cliches, they're not stereotypes. My main character, Hayden, as I describe him, he's 5'4", rounding up. He's 130 pounds, rounding up. He's got crazy red hair. He's like a little ginger pocket gay guy. He is not your typical hero.
Right.
He doesn't
Right.
have a six pack, right? He talks about like, gosh, I guess, like watching the Sci-Fi Channel on the elliptical trainer for 20 minutes a week. It's not getting me a six pack. Hollister is a butch lesbian, but she's got girl troubles and she's really a softie at heart, right? So I tried to make these and she's got her own business. So I try to make these characters, again, over the top so they're entertaining and you can kind of envision them. I describe Hollister as Serena Williams, but with a mohawk.
Nice.
Actually,
Nice.
another author, Alan Orloff, one thing authors like to do is like fantasize about who would play this part. And I've
Mhm.
never come up
Right.
with a lot of great actors to play the main characters. But he said, oh, Leslie Jones would be so perfect for Hollister. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. So Leslie Jones, if you're listening.
Right.
But, I
There's a
do try
project out there for you, girl.
Right.
yeah. I try to turn them up like Spinal Tap, if you remember that, like rockumentary of like
Hmm.
to 11,
Hmm.
where he's like putting the amp up to 11 because it's louder.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I try to dial up the characters to 11, but not 12.
Okay.
It's just kind of my line, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does.
I want them to be bigger and entertaining, and for the reader to be able to kind of visualize what they look like. And, I made them purposefully tall and small and mild mannered. And, what you see is what you got a problem kind of attitude.
Nice.
Right. It's kind of the Goonies effect, which is a very queer concept because it's just that diversity of people you want to hang with, but you may all come from different walks of life,
Mhm.
and it's
Right.
just the happenstance of that sometimes makes it work.
Right. Right.
All right.
It really is. It's people I would like to hang out with. It goes back to Vance, your question about like, am I filling a void or am I, kind of trying to join a lane, that's already got a few, cars in it. It really was just like, I wrote, it's so selfish in a way that I wrote a book that I wanted to read, or that kind of book. I wanted to like go on an adventure with these silly people, and it's like, wow, that sounds like fun. It's a little improbable, but that's okay. It's fiction.
Yeah.
As long as it's not like that's, they're not flying from place to place, or something crazy.
Excellent. Is there anything else you would like folks to know about Devil's Chew Toy?
It's, I would say it's just, it's big hearted, and hopefully there's a few laughs. And I describe it as, it's kind of like the froth on your latte. This is not, dark blend espresso. It's not a brooding, deep mystery.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody's read Bath House by PJ Vernon, sorry, it's a very gritty, really great, well done thriller. Great book, I recommend. I point that out because this is the other end of the spectrum. Right, where there's murder and mayhem, and it's like, it's dark, gritty, violent. It's like, this is not, right? This is a quick, fun read. I would hope it comes across as big-hearted with larger-than-life characters. So if you're looking for something fun and light and frothy, but hopefully is still at its heart is a good mystery, give it a whirl.
All right.
And the quozy part of it, how queer or off the center track of cozy are you permitted in, or that you envision? How do you see? Because part of queer life is to subvert the expectation. That's what we do best.
Yeah.
So how does that fit for quozy as far as a definition? Because if we have many authors who not only come on the show, but they also listen to the show, and there may be some out there going, oh, there's something new that I can play with. So how do you see quozy as far as the spectrum of what's allowed and what isn't or should be?
And people say this all the time in response to questions. That's a really good question. That is really, really, really a good question. I'm so glad you brought that up, because my intention was to, very much so, was to write a book, again, main characters. I didn't want them to be the victims, the villains, or nasty to one another. I had, there's a character we haven't mentioned, 91-year-old Jerry, who is in many ways the brains of the operation, right? He's a Matlock binge watcher, and he loves Reagan. And so, it's like, he's his own thing, but he's a pretty sweet guy. And the main character befriends him. Well, I had him drop the F-bomb a few times in the book. Because that's like, if anybody gets to do it, he has license
to
do
him.
it. He can do whatever the hell he wants.
Mm-hmm.
And the editor's like, oh no, this is a cozy. You can't. And I was like, I didn't write a cozy. This is true. And I'm like, I guess my intentions for the sensibility of the book overlap with a lot of the constraints that the cozy world, it demands of those kinds of stories. It just happened. So then to bring it fuller into the lane of a cozy, we had to cut some of the profanity. I didn't have the main character having any sex. He certainly has sexual thoughts. In fact, he has a blog about gay dating. So it's out there, but there's nothing that violates those cozy rules. But I am not. This is kind of an ongoing argument in the best way with my editor and also agents. Like, oh, but this is a cozy. And I'm like, it is, but again, that's not my intention. I don't want to be constrained by that world, which, if you look at the readership of cozy mysteries, they tend to be straight, white, older. Mm-hmm. And, there's a real question of are those people reading the book? Many of them do, because I meet them at conferences or I get mail from them, and that's awesome. Did I write the book for them? Well, I wrote it for all readers, but again, I wrote it for really for gays and lesbians and everybody in that big, beautiful canopy of LGBTQ plus. That was who I was really going for. Now, if other straight, white, cisgendered readers pick it up and enjoy it, they can, because another thing I've said about it is the gay and lesbian main characters, the story doesn't demand they be gay or lesbian.
Mm-hmm.
I just argue they have a lot more fun because they are. And
Right,
for me,
right.
as a gay man, I find them, I think representation is important,
Mm-hmm.
but also relatability, because, you know, he doesn't go to the gym every, you know, day for 2 hours. He doesn't, you know, go to white parties. And I'm not like against those things. I'm just saying that that's not something that I, as a
Right.
gay person, have ever related to.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He's more on the nerdy side, which is more where I'm at and was. So that's kind of a convoluted answer, but yeah, that's how I feel about cozy. It's like I'm not down on cozy. It's like it was nominated for an Agatha, which is essentially a cozy award. And what won was Cheddar Off Dead, you know, about a cheese shop, which is, you know, a great book. But, you know, it's, if you look at the other authors in those books, you know, they're all by, you know, straight people featuring straight characters as protagonists. So this is, you know, I've picked a fairly narrow lane,
Mm-hmm.
but that's what I wanted to do.
I love it.
Excellent. Thank you.
So I know your bio teases a couple of upcoming works. Do you want to talk about one of them?
Sure. I'll pick the one that's coming out next.
Mm-hmm.
It's in September, October, Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine,
Mm-hmm.
and it's called Misdirection. I think it's entertaining. I hope readers think it's entertaining. It features an amateur sleuth who's a non-binary, cross-dressing, middle-aged nut called, and his name is Perry Winkle. And he finds a body in the community social room. And without any spoilers, it turns out to be this woman, kind of mysterious woman named Misdirection. And Misdirection was her old burlesque name.
Nice.
But she's past her prime. So that's the next. And so kudos to Janet Hutchings at Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine for buying that.
Nice. Well, which
Lovely.
social is the best for people to keep up with the updates as that gets nearer to publication?
It is. And let me just squeeze in this one, because this it's another just super gay one. Is in that anthology on Elvis Costello songs, I picked The Angels Want to Wear My Red Shoes. And the red shoes are a pair of stolen Louboutins from Patio Doors, who is a drag queen. It all takes place at a drag club behind the scenes. There's drama, murder, and a pair of missing Louboutins.
That's fantastic. All right, I definitely want to know which social people should follow to keep up with your updates then.
Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, but probably Twitter I'm most, you know, I keep up on.
As long as it's around.
And robosler.com has it all.
Yep.
And
There you go.
up to date.
That's the perfect springboard for finding the links to the others.
Yep.
Any final words of wisdom?
No, just thank you. And, you know, read expansively. Everybody read expansively. You know, I've read many a book my whole life, right? Most of them by straight authors featuring straight characters, doing straight things with straight people. And, you know, read more expansively, and not just, straight people reading, gay authored books, but, books by my friend Raquel Reyes, about Caribbean American cooking, or Jennifer Chow and Chinese American life in LA. Just read more expansively. That's what books are supposed to do.
That is a beautiful message. Wholeheartedly endorsed by this channel.
Awesome.
All right, folks, we'd like to extend a huge thank you to Rob Osler for being with us. Rob, thank you so very much.
Thank you, guys. This was a treat.
Our pleasure. All right, we at Written on the Edge are proud to introduce you to new media by queer content creators. So if you enjoy learning about new artists, please like and subscribe to get the alerts for new episodes. Now, on to our review.
So here we are now with Rote Reviews. And this week we're doing something that is still has a queer center, but it's a little bit of a different take of a movie that people probably wouldn't necessarily gravitate towards, although it has really good ratings on IMDb and it has really good ratings on Rotten Tomatoes. And my cat is doing a photobomb. It is a film that actually I have some history with the dance troupe that is at the center of it. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, I can't remember what year it was. I think it might have been either 89 or 92. It's one of those 2 years. I had the benefit of I was working in the theater community. I was working, doing lots of semi-professional and professional shows at the time, literally back to back. I was working a full-time job and doing theater at night. That was my life for about a good 7 to 10 years. And I had a really good friend that I worked with at a theatrical distribution company called San Diego Stage and Lighting, and she was a equity stage manager. So she would get gigs and have all these great things, and I got to go see a lot of shows because she would get me in to see the shows because I would be on her list. So at the time, my partner and I, we would go see these shows, and one of the ones we got to see is mentioned in this movie, and the movie we're talking about is And Then We Danced, which came out in 2019. So it was filmed in the before times, before COVID, and it takes place in Tbilisi, Georgia. Now, the Georgian National Dance Company is the company that I'm speaking about that I have a history with. And the reason why I say a history with is because my friend, Elizabeth Stevens, who is the stage manager, she's a phenomenal lady. And she invited my then boyfriend, Eric, and I to go see the show. And then afterwards, she held a huge cast party at her house. And so we were able to go there. We were able to mingle with the Georgian dancers. And I have to say, from a personal standpoint, the Georgian National Dance Troupe, that particular company that I met, could not have been better ambassadors for their country if they tried. They are my reason why I have a love of Georgians and Georgian culture, and how I am very, very concerned about their aspirations into the EU and, hopefully at some point NATO. So I have a very, very strong connection and a very, very heartfelt connection with the Georgians, and especially the National Dance Troupe Company. So this is a story that has a queer relationship. I don't want to say it's a full-on romance, although I guess you could classify that because queer romances are kind of not necessarily your typical romances sometimes. But the write-up of it is a passionate coming-of-age tale set amidst the conservative confines of modern Tbilisi. The film follows Mirab, a competitive dancer who's thrown off balance by the arrival of Irakli, a fellow male dancer with a rebellious streak. It's gotten, as of the recording of this episode, 7.6 rating on IMDb. So for a foreign film that you have to listen to Georgian speak and you have to read the subtitles, I think it's a very captivating story. What did you think about it?
Not having any of that history, I watched it first, and the actual overarching story feels very familiar. It's a homophobic region. The main character is involved in an art, falls in love, has a love interest. There's a couple of steamy, passionate moments, but then the love interest decides to not be gay anymore. Heartbreak, the emotion of that is channeled into the art. That
Right.
feels very familiar. In terms of a story ladder, it felt familiar. So I'm like, okay, there's got to be something deeper. So I went and started researching, and I researched what the director went through to get this made. Cast, crew, even locations did not want to be a part of this because they were afraid of the reprisal of their communities. The actors were afraid they would never work again. The director fought and fought and fought to get this film made, and he was originally told he had to make the gay character French coming in to visit, and he did not want to do that. So he got to tell the story his way, but he did twist it so that it's actually a story about masculinity and national identity. And once I read that, everything clicked about this story.
Right.
And the hero of this story to me was the director.
And the cast. I mean, but it's interesting. Okay, I'll balance what you've read, what you've said with. There's a YouTube blogger that I watch, Roman, he's got millions of followers on YouTube. He's very, very successful. He is now living in Tbilisi, Georgia, and because he's Russian and he left the country because of the conscription thing going on and the mobilization. And so he's been there since March of last year. And one of the things he has touched upon the queer community within Georgia. And it's really interesting because he's not gay. He, is straight, but he is very open and he accepts, everybody for whoever they are, and one of the things he commented was, that the gays now are pretty much intermingling with mainstream society. It still has a feeling of oppression, but he says it seems to be lessening. So that's a positive thing. I think now that And Then We Danced has been produced and has been released and met with a lot of great criticism and a lot of rave reviews. I think some of that probably will be easier next time because they've seen that the backlash didn't really happen
Right.
in that way. So I think that that's kind of the benefit of, when you're first, I go back to my original discussion about Making Love when it was released in 1982. And there were several gay movies before that, but that was my experience of going through that within a theater and actually feeling the audience change their perception of the film while you're watching it, feeling that wave come across you as a queer person. I can definitely see that being like a movie like this, portraying it and even talking about it. There is that overarching story that goes behind that everybody talks about with another dancer who got caught having sex with another man. And so there's that ghost lingering around Mirab, as he uncovers and discovers more about himself that I don't think he was fully aware of. I think he had inklings and he had, because there were lingering glances he would give here and there. But I think it wasn't until he met Erlaki that he finally had an awakening, a real awakening of who he was. And what I loved most about the film was the final sequence where they kept saying, "Oh, we understand. Go, you're done. We're done with the audition for the national company." And he continued and he kept pressing forward. And at the very end, when he takes the jacket off and he disrobes in front of them as he's going through the door, you can see he's leaving that sense of what makes a man in their eyes behind. And he's actually becoming more of a man because he's moving forward in the face of that. And I think that was a really, really beautiful moment in the film. And I think every queer person would feel inspired by the ending of that film. And obviously with the rave reviews, many people in the community do feel that way. So I thought it was beautifully cast. I thought that it was, it definitely, you felt immersed in Georgian culture. And I will say, going back to the National Dance Troupe, and the reason why I say they could not have been better ambassadors if they tried, because obviously, my boyfriend and I at the time were very close, very intimate. And so we weren't like, having sex on the floor in front of them. But I mean, we didn't hide that we were a couple, and they embraced us. We had fun. They included us in teaching us how to dance some of the Georgian dances. So it was, like I said, I think that the thing about the Georgian people that I love so much is their zest for life, their passion about their dance, the passion about their culture, within the confines of dance and what they bring to it and the spirit of it. And so for me, this was kind of a bittersweet remembrance of that time and how I literally fell in love with the Georgians as a people because they were so open, so welcoming, and they completely blew away all of my misconceptions of what at that time, because Russia had just started to form, that the collapse had just, in fact, I think it must have been 1989, because I think Russia was still a thing in Georgia. I don't think they had achieved any independence at that point. So for them to be in America, they obviously felt any oppressive regime of the Soviet thing. And we didn't even have any Soviet handlers with them that I can recall. So they didn't have to be careful with what they said. They didn't have to be careful in their expression of stuff. They spoke English. It wasn't fluent, but they could get a point, their point across. So it's just a wonderful thing. So for me, this movie was a very, very lovely, bittersweet, to remember those people and to be very thankful that they welcomed us in. They were in our country, they were the guests, but you felt like you were a guest with them, and they treated you with loving hands. And so that, to me, is what made this movie phenomenal. I wished, and I understand why it ended the way it did, and I like the fact that it's one of those stories that I say sometimes the happy ending is that you find yourself and you find your own worth, and you say, no more, never again. I'm going to move forward from this and be even stronger. And I think that's the beauty of this message for the queer community, as far as of how it represents us and how we find our way to thrive in really oppressive situations. So this movie is definitely one of those stories that I think can move people to remember all of those who have come before us who had to fight harder. I think for the children, it definitely gives them a taste of what you and I grew up with as we grew up and had to meet with that oppression. So I think it's a win-win all the way around. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'll say, and speaking of how it was received, and just to share, if the emotional content that Baz just described does not sway you, at the 2019 Cannes Film Festival, this was aired during the director's fortnight, and it received a 15-minute standing ovation. So, the filmmakers of the world recognized the brilliance of this film.
Mm-hmm.
So, I highly recommend people see it, 100%.
Yeah, very good. And I loved the Georgian music. And can I just say, ballerinas, shut the fuck up about your toe shoes. Georgian men do on point dancing with no toe shoes. They are literally on the tips of their toes. No toe shoe. Okay? Let me just put it out there.
Is there any variation in your numbers, your ratings?
No, they're fives. It's all fives. Just because I think this is a very important film. And again, the bittersweet factor is just no matter what my other numbers would have been, it pops it back up.
For me, production quality, script, screenplay, sound, lighting, score were 4s. Art direction, costuming, I bumped up to a 4.5 because they actually dug into the traditional wardrobe and pulled out authentic costumes, which was beautiful to see. Casting, a 5, because this cast, like I said, not only were they brave enough to take on the roles, but they put so much heart into it that they brought me into the story. Directing, I gave a 6. I'm going to break your rating scale right there. And again, not only did the director tell the story he wanted to tell in the face of opposition, but he was able to pivot, twist, change, and still tell his story with the bravery to do so. So yes, a 6. Queer themes presented, a 5. Unfortunately, this is still a struggle in a lot of parts of the world. So this is still a story we need to pay attention to. So my personal overall was a 4.75.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll echo what you said about it, but I'll balance it with definitely when you hear the youth, especially a Russian guy who's living in Georgia and he's mixing with the youth of the Georgian culture and their aspirations for EU inclusion. I think the culture is really starting to open up and recognize, and it's a process.
Oh, it
This is
is.
not a society that will change immediately. Old positions die hard. Dinosaurs will exist for a while. And actually, oddly enough, that comment of mine right now will tie into what are we on about. So,
What are you on about, Mr. Dinosaur?
okay, so I have a couple of things that I've got for what am I on about. I have first the Little Richard documentary that's out there. I want to put that out there for the children. It's Little Richard, I Am Everything, I think is what it's called. I'll fly
What's it
it here
on?
so people can see it. And the children need to understand that you wouldn't have Little Nas X, you wouldn't have Boy George, you wouldn't have Prince, you wouldn't have all of those androgynous, queer sort of representations that we have now and we enjoy if you didn't have Little Richard, who first broke those barriers with the guy liner and with the wild queer antics, and just he was unabashedly queer. Went through a phase where he kind of tabled all of that with a religious kind of awakening, but overall he went at the time of his death, he had balanced everything out and understood what his journey was and what contributions he brought to it all. And I think there's a really interesting video I saw of him and Liberace. Can you believe that combination on a show? And I'll put the link down in the show notes, or as Kathleen Madigan says, the schnotes. That we'll put a link to it, but it was hysterical to see these two queer icons on a talk show at the same time, both in their regalia. It was the most glittery fucking thing I'd ever seen. So I'm on about the Little Richard doc. I think people should definitely check it out, and we'll probably end up doing a reaction or a review of it sometime in the future. Second up, George Michael has been nominated for an induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which I think is highly warranted. The man had some of the biggest numbers in the 80s and 90s, sales wise. His contribution to pop music and into the rock genre, definitely he was a brilliant songwriter. He knew how to write a catchy tune. And by the time of his untimely passing, he had amassed a huge following, a huge devoted following, especially within the queer community. And my last thing I'm on about is the Tony nominations are out, and they have never been more queer. And I know that's really an oxymoron when you're talking about theater and Broadway, but no, seriously, go and check out the nominations and dig a little deeper on who these characters and people are. There's a lot of queer representation this year. Alex Newell is nominated from Glee. So she's made the progression to actually she's playing a female lead character in the show, and evidently knocking it out of the park. So I highly recommend that people check out the nom list. The Tonys are going to be in September, I think is when they are, or is it April? I'll put the date up here. They have the date already posted, but I'll put it up here so people can see it. So that's what I'm on about this week. What about you?
Wedding 1 of 3 is down, and the reason I bring that up is because if you have a wedding to plan in your future, plan something a little non-standard, because it was beautiful and stunning, and I will remember this one for the rest of my life. They had rented a farm that had a giant unused glass. I mean, it's probably an old greenhouse, but it was kind of made to look like a conservancy as an emergency rain option, but it was a starlight wedding. So people weren't sweating under the hot sun. Everything was lit by candlelight and starlight and moonlight, and it was a full moon this weekend, so it was out of this world beautiful. The photographer obviously knew what he was doing. It's a little androgynous, and I loved it. But had all the right filters and everything to capture everything with the right feel. Because I've seen some of the pictures already posted. It was amazing. So if you have a wedding in your future, think outside the box just a little bit. I mean, their ceremony was still a Christian ceremony in every other way. Just the setting made it a little fairy tale. It was excellent.
Brilliant.
Thing number two, after the wedding, husband and I were still kind of wired and jazzed, so we just sort of flipped on the TV while we were getting the dogs ready for bed and stuff. And he like found Nicolas Cage's History of Swear Words from, I guess, last year. I had no idea it was even out. And the very first episode was our number one answer last year to what was your favorite swear word? That's right, the F-bomb. I hadn't laughed so hard in a long time, but they reaffirmed everything our author guest said last year about that one word and how versatile and beloved it was. But then they talk a little about the science behind endorphins when you swear and how it makes you feel a little bit better. It'll help you push through a little bit of pain. So I think it's the first time in my life I can honestly say I've enjoyed a Nicolas Cage thing, but I did enjoy it.
I don't know. I'm looking forward to seeing Renfield. So, I guess Nicolas Cage is just behaving in that movie. He's not really acting, in my opinion.
That's what I'm getting from the previews too. But I love any take on Dracula, and this looks like a good one.
Right.
In terms of on about, I think that's about it. Like I said, my week has been fairly busy, so there's not a lot to report on that front.
Yeah, you're in full-blown wedding season, so yeah.
I know.
I totally get it.
Well, Mother's Day's next, and they're all converging. They're all converging on my house.
Yeah. All right. So, who won your week?
So, in the E. Jean Carroll case against Donald J. Trump, both sides had given closing arguments and were ready to end things on Thursday, and the judge was going to then give jury instructions on Friday. But like in the last minute, or last hour, I should say, Trump over in Ireland golfing had to mouth off on social media about how he'd better get over there and set these people straight. And Judge Kaplan caught it and went, "Oh, well, I'll extend things if you want to put your defendant on the stand." Called his bluff. Judge Kaplan won my week for calling Trump's bluff, because now Trump either had
in real time.
In real time. So Trump either had to put up and show up, or
shut the hell up.
Cop to the fact that he was just blustering for social media purposes. And his team did not file by the deadline on Sunday to put him on the stand. Shocker. Because do you think that his lawyer team might realize that the surest way to lose the case is to put Trump on the stand and let him talk? I think they know that. So yes.
Yeah, I was sitting here contemplating before you said that. I wonder which one he chose.
So, yes, Judge Kaplan is the winner of my week for calling Trump's bluff. Bravo.
All right. Bravo. Love that. Okay. Oh, there was one other thing. What am I on about? I forgot. And Jay sent this to me, and I just thought it was hysterical. So, quick little sidebar or sidetrack throwback to our what are we on about? It appears that cats love sitting in boxes, and we all kind of know that. But there's been a recent study that supports that. There was a mat that was created that the studiers wanted to see, the scientists wanted to see how cats applied box shapes that aren't real boxes, and whether or not they would gravitate to the one that held an outline. What they did is they had this big blue mat, and I'll show the picture here. And they have like these Pac-Man circles on the blue mat. The circles are white with like the little right angle cutout of them. And they have different settings where the circles are turned different ways. And only one of them makes a box shape because all the right angles are appropriately parallel to each other. So they let the cat in, and the owners of the cat or their humans were in the room, but they were told not to look at their cat, and they were told to wear sunglasses so the cat couldn't see their eyes. And they wanted to see how it panned out. And it's really funny, but it turns out that the cats will go sit in an illusion of a box more than they will not. So it's just really interesting to see that even a full physical box is not required. If you just draw a square, chances are the cat will go and sit in it. I just thought that was hysterical. I totally forgot that I had that queued up. So on to who won my week. It's split, and it's really split because of the timeliness for one of the winners of my week. And that is Robert Reich, who was an economist under the Obama administration. And no, was it the Obama or Clinton, Jay? Clinton administration.
Secretary of Labor.
Okay. And husband correction there. But he has
got his voice
blog...
on tape.
Yeah, I know. I should photobomb him. But he has 2 articles out that I'm going to link down in the notes. Sorry, Kathleen, I'm adopting that. What first one is called "What's Really Behind the Republicans' Mounting Transphobia," and I'll put the link down in the notes. And it's a great write-up of what's going on with the Montana Democrat and transgender woman Zoe Zephyr, who has been ousted from the 100th District of Montana House of Representatives and who is being silenced. And he has a great write-up of what's really behind the Republicans' mounting transphobia. So, a worthy read. Definitely go check it out. He also then followed that up with a rather positive one. And I know Vance likes his positive news, so I'm going to add this one to the mix. There is a new one he put out called "Why New Progressive Era in America is Likely in About 20 Years." And he goes through and kind of highlights each of the reasons that he sees the changes coming. Just one of them says, the newly elected progressives view America's widening inequalities of income and wealth as dangerous. They believe government has no business forcing women to give birth or telling consenting adults how to conduct the most intimate aspects of their lives. They want to limit access to guns. They see climate change as an existential threat to the nation and the world. They want to act against systemic racism. They want to protect American democracy from authoritarianism. And then he breaks it down into separate points that he explains why the trend is going more and more progressive and why those Republicans and conservatives who are fighting tooth and nail, bringing out old playbooks because they know deep down inside that their positions are not popular. And so this is why we're seeing the epic slide into dinosaurism. The last gasps of the dinosaur are starting to really make themselves known. And he ends it with a rather prophetic little thing. He says, all these trends point to a new progressive America in about 20 years. 20 years is a long time, of course. These trends have already ignited an anti-democracy backlash, especially from Americans who are older, whiter, straighter, without college degrees, and mostly male. That is, from people susceptible to authoritarianism, strongmen, peddling conspiracy theories, and stoking hatred. The Republican Party knows it's doomed unless it radically restricts voting or goes full throttle and wholly adopts Trumpian fascism. So, my friends, the stakes could not be higher. So, something to watch out for, but Robert Reich wins part of my Who Won the Week. The other one is the country of Denmark, a country that I wholeheartedly love. The only country that I've ever left that I actually shed tears as I was leaving. I just want to get back to that country at some point. But what happened was we had kind of an international war of words between the town of Solvang here in the United States, in California, no less, a city that I've been to. And, it's one of my stops. If I drive up 101 up the coast in California, it goes through Solvang. And I usually make a stop there. It's like one of my stops that I like to go to because I just like going and seeing, getting some of the Danish pastries and all that kind of stuff. So it's just a neat little side trip that makes me feel like I'm in Denmark again. But they had a vote in Solvang to not allow the pride flags to be flown, and there was coming onslaught of people who were complaining about how political it was, how divisive it was. And so the Solvang mayor and the surrounding council members all started to go into a panic. And so they were starting to have votes where they were denying Pride their moving forward. So, the Danish Lord Mayor of Copenhagen, Denmark, Sophie Historip Andersen, wrote a letter to Solvang's mayor urging Santa Ynez Valley Danish-themed city to work toward a more inclusivity for the LGBTQIA plus community. Solvang Mayor Mark Infante said each member of the Solvang City Council received a copy of the letter last Thursday, April 13th. This letter discusses the events in and near Solvang as the 2022 summer burning of pride flags in the Santa Ynez Valley. The Lord Mayor Anderson began her letter by writing, "Your city's status as the Danish capital of America is something that you rightly cherish." She also mentioned the bond between their two cities. She then wrote about Copenhagen and Denmark having a proud tradition of acceptance and inclusion of LGBTI plus people. You'll know already of Denmark's long-standing position as one of the most progressive countries in the world, Lord Mayor Anderson wrote. She continued to list years where LGBTQIA plus communities held events in the city of Copenhagen dating all the way back to the 1970s. She mentioned Copenhagen hosted World Pride in 2021. It is against this background that I was surprised to read about the opposition from some of your council members to put ideas forward by your LGBTI plus community for Solvang to embrace the Santa Ynez Valley Pride publicly and visibly. I was also shocked to read of the burning of the Pride flag shortly after the Pride events of last summer. Below, which was in 2022. Below are recent coverage items of events listed above. So they list out some of the things that they were voting down on. So she then sent it to the mayor, and he said he responded to the Lord Mayor, but declined to share the details of his response. And this is his quote: "Instead, I would prefer to respond to the comments in the Copenhagen Pride article directly." So Copenhagen Pride published an article Infante mentioned on Monday, April 17th, so this is all last month, about Lord Mayor's letter to Solvang, titled "Danish Town in California Urged to Embrace Pride by Copenhagen's Mayor." In response to where Copenhagen Pride's article mentioned the pride flags burned in Solvang, Infante said, "That is also untrue. I have heard of that occurring in the valley, but not here in Solvang." Within the article, the author wrote, Copenhagen Pride has said that it will replace every flag burned in Solvang last summer with 2 new flags. They will be sent to California in time for this summer's Pride. As for the Rainbow's House submission to Solvang City Council for rainbow-colored crosswalks and the light pole banners, Infante said the issue is that with the crosswalks is the minor violation of state standards for crosswalks, and more importantly, the safety of the horse-drawn trolley, Honen, and other horses. Now, what's interesting about that is he's citing something that is not true in that respect. It may be for the city of Solvang, but that's not a state thing because San Francisco has fucking rainbow crosswalks in the Castro. So bite it, honey.
Palm Springs has one too.
Yeah. So the Solvang mayor said 3 different horse trainers informed him that horses perceive colors differently and could easily avoid, sidestep, refuse to cross, or balk at the colors. Please. You know how many horses have been in pride parades? That's just fucking ridiculous. Anyways, so all of that happened, right? So then it's interesting because the letter came out, all of the hullabaloo started happening, all of the major news started picking up on it. And so there was a reversal, but it's a half win. In front of a standing room only crowd, the Solvang City Council on Monday approved the proposal to fly rainbow banners to celebrate Pride Month, reversing a previous vote that sparked public outcry and international flap. Cheers and applause rang out as members of the audience shook posters reading, "We see you, we hear you, we support you." The approval represented a compromise between the applicant, Rainbow House Incorporated, an LGBTQ resource center, and the council, who heard from critics that the banners were political and agenda-driven and therefore not appropriate for public right-of-way. The 8 downtown banners will fly for 2 weeks in June, but not for the full month. They will no longer be accompanied by rainbow crosswalks. Mayor Infante cast the deciding vote, switching sides to join council members Elizabeth Orona and Claudia Orona, no relation between them, in support. I want to acknowledge this is probably very uncomfortable for many people who don't understand the LGBTQ community, said Councilmember Elizabeth Arona. But at this point, we need to move forward and accept some change and accept some discomfort. Councilmember Robert Clark maintained his opposition to the project, expressing concern over earlier drag shows hosted by Rainbow House and the grooming effect they have on children. I'm not a bad person for not understanding drag shows, Clark said in a response to the backlash his comments have received. And I'm not a bad person for thinking there's a lot of politics involved in this. But it's interesting because some of the people that came back at him and addressed their comments directly toward this council member. And what's interesting is this guy actually lost his race to be on city council, but was appointed to fill a vacant seat in the interim until they could have a special election. So his votes and his comments are kind of nonsensical because he doesn't really have a position to speak of. All right. A number of public speakers directed their comments toward Clark personally. Lifelong Solvang resident Elizabeth Walther, who said she and her children are members of the LGBTQ community, told him, "My family is not political. Our existence is not political." She called his statements about gay and transgender residents absolutely unacceptable. Mary Beth Lee, also a Solvang native, addressed another comment by Clark that he doesn't understand the concept of pride. Pride is the opposite of shame, Lee said, and the LGBTQ people have endured a history of shaming and marginalization for who they are and who they love. Pride is about acting in the opposite spirit and affirming their dignity and place in society, Lee explained. And if you can't understand that, you're just ignorant. So it's definitely met with some heated stuff going back and forth. Megan Dittenhofer, a descendant of Danish immigrants who now operates Figueroa Mountain Brewing Company, pushed against the criticism that the banners would hurt business. She said, having a more diverse community and having a more diverse visitors visit is good for tourism, she said. She described the negative response to the banners as a backlash to change. And then they go on to talk about how the makeup of Solvang has changed over time. But, the bottom line is they've reversed their position. The council heeded the warning from Ben Goa, a person who was really kind of opposed to the whole thing. And he's threatening that the council will be exhibiting extremely discriminatory behavior and setting itself up for legal intervention. So there we go. The playbook's already rolling out. But the council members are undeterred. They said, "It sucks," said Council Member Claudia Arona, "that we are in this position," but there you are. So, the country of Denmark wins my week with Robert Reich because they stepped in when they saw something going on, and since they like to tout they are the Danish capital of America, the Danes had something to say about it. So,
in other words, another bluff got called.
Yeah. There's our theme.
All right. That was an awful lot of words, so I'm not going to ask for words of wisdom, folks. Written on the edges, produced by Rogue Ravens Media. For our disclaimers, links to social media, our listen stations, or to sign up as a guest, visit www.rotepodcast.com. If you enjoy learning about new artists, please like and subscribe so you get the alerts for new episodes. Our new Patreon levels are in. Please, please, please go pick one. There's a $2 level. That's all we ask. Help us make this channel self-supportive. And tune in next week for your queer media fix.
I said buy a copy, not buy a coffee. I don't know why I said it that way. Bye-bye now.
And that was my blooper.
Oh, what's that? Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.